Welcome to Rounds. It's probably one of the oldest buildings on campus that belonged to the school. It was built in 1881. It housed the high school and the grade school at the time on the first floor, and on the second floor was actually the first library that belonged to the school. And it's interesting. It's got a clock tower, and so that's the history. And I'm going to talk about kind of the stories I've heard about this building. Not too many compelling stories, but the first story I heard was people who saw a figure in the clock tower, and they could see it from the Mary Lion Lawn just looking up. And sometimes people would look up and point at it for me, and you could actually see this figure moving while you were standing on the lawn, and it was any day of the week, any time. Sometimes you would see this figure. So I thought I would investigate it. So I came into this building at night. This was the first investigation I did on campus. This was 2 weeks into my freshman year being here, and so we came to check out this place, and what we found was on the second floor, we were saying, who are you? Where are you from? Do you live here? Did you work here? Are you male or female? And generally, you don't get an answer right away. You just have to hope it gets recorded on camera, and the next day when you're reviewing it, you capture some of these voices. And so while we were waiting for these responses, Nicole, myself, and one of our friends, Ryan, all started to smell cigarette smoke, and so strong that it smelled like it was in the same exact room. So we turned on this little device I have called the EMF detector. It measures electromagnetic fields in the atmosphere, and you can ask yes or no questions with that. And so we asked, is there a spirit here? Is there a ghost here? And it said yes. Is this a male? Yes. And then we asked, did you smoke when you went here, or when you worked here? And it said yes. And we asked, are you smoking right now? And it said yes. So that was enough compelling information for us. It was late at night at that point, so we just packed up. And it was the next day that while we were asking these questions on the second floor, we were hearing some low chattering between two males. We were actually hearing some laughing as well. And another point in the investigation that was fairly compelling was we were all on the second floor, and we heard a lot of banging coming from the first floor. And so I went downstairs to go check it out, and sure enough, there was nothing that I could really see. And it was the next day that I had a class in this room that I noticed that there were these metal lockers, and when you hit them, they made the exact same noise as what we were hearing the night before. So that was kind of interesting. We captured these two pieces of crazy evidence on camera, and I thought that was pretty cool. Little did I know, this is nothing compared to the evidence I've captured in other buildings on campus. And as we go around, you'll learn that I keep collecting more and more compelling evidence at these places. Back to the bell tower, why is there someone inside the bell tower that people are seeing? I ended up going down to the clerk's office at the town hall, collecting death records starting from 1890 on until I believe 1915 at the time, because you can only take out 100 years or so before, like, as someone has passed away. And so in 1900, I found a death record of a boy who was 17, and his last name was Monteith. There was no first name on the death record, but he had drowned in the Pemi right in front of us, not down or not up the river, right in front of the school. And his job was the bellboy. So he would have to maintain the bell. He would ring the bell at certain times. I think it was every 6 hours he would ring the bell to let everyone know what time it was. So he practically lived up there, and it was his job when he was 17. So are we seeing, this boy still in the bell tower as he had spent so many years? So that was, interesting. It was interesting to me, and it was backed up by some historical evidence as well. who puts the pumpkins up. They kind of just appear a couple weeks before Halloween, which is a great tradition. As Louise and I were just saying, it started in 1975. We were talking about this before you guys got here, but it's an interesting tradition. This is the Samuel Reed Hall building. This actually has a pretty extensive history to it. It used to be the Peppered House prior to its purchase from the university in 1923, and these were two separate buildings. Heritage Commons used to be the barn belonging to the Peppards, and then this building here used to be their actual house. And so in 1923, the school decided that they needed some more dorms. It was going to be a male dormitory. And so what they actually did was purchase the barn in 1923 and made that a dormitory for men. In 1926, they needed more male dorm rooms, so they built this building here. They bought the other part of the Peppered House, the actual house, not the barn, and they made them one cohesive building, which is why you see, you know, Heritage Commons as one, and then you kind of see Samuel Reed Hall building as another. Samuel Reed Hall, he was a president here at Plymouth State University. I think it was after the Holmes Academy, and it became a new university going under the University System of New Hampshire. He was the president for this university, so that's what the building is named after. Louise, was it 1923 or 1926? Around that time, they were also building tunnel systems right underneath here. Around that same time, because
Sooner than that.
Sooner?
When Mary Lyon went up in
16.
1916, they already had one part of
Right.
this building 2 rounds.
Okay, and that's important because Mary Lyon, when it went up in 1916, it was a female dorm. You had females training to be teachers here, and they would take classes and also do student teaching at the grade school and high school and rounds. So they didn't want to walk through the snow. The school didn't want them walking through the snow with their skirts. So they actually built a tunnel system going over to rounds. So that's the first part of the tunnel system. I believe there's 3 or 5 tunnels that go over to Heritage Commons, one to Blair, another to Memorial. That might be 4. There might just be 4 then. And then Mary Lyon is the epicenter of it. And that went up in 1916. We'll learn more history on that. So for a long time, these were dorms, and it wasn't until 2015 that these became academic classrooms. And so while they were dorms, they also had an extensive history. There used to be a rec room, you know, like a student lounge in the attic of this place. And while I can't get the death record because it hasn't been 100 years yet, there's a lot of confirmed stories of a student in the 80s who hung himself from a support beam in the rec room. And shortly after they found this kid, they ended up turning it into a weight room, moving the student lounge and rec room to this side of the building on the first floor. And while it was a weight room in the late 80s, there were reports that where they hung a punching bag from the same beam that this kid had hung himself, people would actually see this punching bag swaying on its own. So that's a little unnerving. Later on, that the whole attic went away. They built a gym inside the Hartman Union building, the student union now, so they didn't have a need for it. And as I said, in 2015, these became academic buildings or rooms. So when I first came here, I had heard about this story of the punching bag, the kid who allegedly hung himself inside the attic. So we decided to go check it out. And I was with a new team this time. Sadly, Nicole wasn't there. With a new investigation team, and we had a police sergeant from UPD come and open the door to the attic, and for some reason his master key, which opens every door on campus, would not open the attic. So it was kind of interesting to think, you wonder why his key wasn't opening the door. And I ended up setting up a camera right at the bottom of the stairs, pointing up the stairs to this water pipe, and I hung my necklace around it to see if we could get that to sway at all during the investigation. When we came back down here, we did the investigation. There was not too much compelling evidence at that time, but what we did find the next day upon looking at the recording was 2 voices captured while the camera was pointing at the necklace. And one voice was a male voice yelling, "My heart just stopped." And then 2 minutes later, there was a female voice that yelled, "Get out, get out." So were these two, together for some reason? I don't know. Were they separate? Perhaps at some points. When you're doing ghost investigations or you live in a haunted house, there's just simply what's called a residual haunt, and that's just a timestamp of history. So maybe like once a year you'll see this thing, or once a month at a specific time you'll hear something. It's just a timestamp of history that's repeating itself. So it could have been that, or it could have been an intelligent haunt, someone actually trying to get our attention. A camera down in the tunnel system, which we can't go in anymore, sadly. We captured a voice down there that said, "I don't feel guilty." And that one was very loud, and I had my volume turned up to 100 on my computer, and it hurt my ears. It was pretty loud. And so during that, and while that sound was captured and that noise was captured, we were on the second floor in a conference room talking to some spirits, ghosts, energies using the EMF detector. And and we were asking it to respond by tapping as well. And so it wasn't just communicating through the EMF detector, which measures the EMFs in the room. It was also tapping on the wall, yes and no. 1 for yes, 2 for no, and we were able to communicate that way. And we have that on camera as well. And we ended up coming into something dark. There was something demonic, negative energy, whatever you want to call it. It was dark and it didn't want us there. And so we said, all right, if you don't want us here, we'll leave. Just do one more thing. And my flashlight, which was in the other room, sitting on a desk with the camera trying to capture something moving, it started to strobe slowly, and then it would get really fast, and then it would slowly strobe again. And the flashlight doesn't have a strobe function on it at all. It turns on and it turns off, and that's it. So that was compelling to see. I ran in there, grabbed it. If there was something happening, I didn't want to see it. We ran back downstairs. And these are the scary times during investigations, because you just want to get out, but now you have to go collect cameras places, and we had to go back in the tunnels and get the cameras in the tunnels and all that stuff, and you just want to leave, but you have to go get your stuff. That was another specific investigation that happened in here. Most recently, 2 weeks ago, I did the same tour for a bunch of first years. Wouldn't you know it? If I was a first year, I wouldn't want to know my room is haunted. I did the same thing with the first years. We actually went into the buildings because it was at night. There were no classes happening, and we went back to the 3rd floor. Up to the door where the attic is, and sure enough, like the 5 people that were standing right next to me, when we were listening on the other side of the door and we said make a sound, you could hear shuffling, you could hear scratching on the door. It was kind of interesting. Same thing when we went back to the 2nd floor and we were just hanging out in the conference room, and I was talking about what happened in the conference room. Sure enough, there was some tapping here and there, and that was 2 weeks ago. And that was with 30 people, and usually I don't have 30 people because there's a lot of room for error. Someone could be moving, someone's always shuffling, who knows. You usually only want 5 people on these things, and maybe the ghosts are afraid of large numbers, but still there's some very compelling things happening on this tour. So the big story that I get from people who live in the basement which are where the piano practice rooms are. As I said, this was a music and theater and art school at the time, so we had a bunch of piano practice rooms put in place in the basement. There are still pianos down there for kids to practice in. And CAs, like community advisors, those are CAs, and students at sometimes 2 and 3 in the morning, sometimes 10 at night, will hear piano, so they'll go, just ask them to quiet down, or at least shut the door to the practice room, and there'll be no one in there. The piano cover will be shut. There will be, the door will be open or closed, the lights will be off. Either way, there was no one in this room when they were first looking at it, and they were hearing this piano. And coincidentally, where the pianos are is also right next to where the tunnels are. So is there someone that's coming out of the tunnels playing this piano, and then when a student comes, they go back into the tunnel? It's interesting. So I keep wanting to go down there and just put a camera on the pianos or put a recorder down there, because I get that story at least once a month, but I get several stories about Blair. For some reason, I have no clue why this is a haunted place. But I get several stories like a week or a month about it. Some of them are about a tall man who is standing at the foot of their bed, which is kind of not good to wake up to at 2 in the morning. There's a natural explanation for that as well. If any of you know what sleep paralysis is, it's a naturally occurring thing. Sometimes you wake up, but your body is still sleeping. And that's just one of the hallucinations to have. It's associated with the REM sleep cycle. But maybe it's a ghost, I don't know. And then there was also a story associated with this in the 80s of a kid who lived on the 3rd floor who attempted suicide, jumping from the 3rd floor, broke his neck. I don't know if it was a successful suicide or not. But what I do know is that he had a twin who came in the next day to come retrieve his stuff, and everyone thought that it was a ghost because they're seeing this kid that had just attempted suicide the day before walking around. So I don't, that might just be a story. But another funny story associated with this building is the tunnel system in Mary Lyon. The story is that Mary Lyon used to go here, and she had a lover who lived in Blair in the 40s and the 50s, and they would sneak into the tunnel system at night to see each other, which you can't do because it was strictly forbidden for males and females to see each other late at night, let alone in a tunnel system. They definitely couldn't be in each other's dorms late at night. And the story is that the tunnel collapsed and they both died in it. And people tell me that all the time. They ask me, is that true? And it's funny because every part of that is incorrect. No one has died in the tunnel system. Mary Lyon never went here. She was a prominent educator in Massachusetts. I'm not sure if she even stepped foot in the state of New Hampshire during her time. Do you know?
No, I was going to say, do you know about another suicide?
There's several.
61 and 64
in here?
building.
I don't know anything about
His
it.
name was Mailer, and I was a student living in this building on that corner there, the corner room.
Yeah.
And he killed himself, shot himself in this building.
Interesting.
I don't remember which year it was because I was only in this building for 3 years.
Did you know him?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I just knew the story because it
Oh.
happened. We knew him. We knew who
I wonder
he
if
was.
he's a tall guy and if he stands at the foot of people's beds. Might be interesting.
I just know we didn't go in his room. I don't remember where.
Oh. Well, that's interesting. Keep that in mind. That's why I do these things, gather information.
I just remember his name was Mailer.
Mailer.
I think I've got the right.
Perfect.
It rhymes with that if that's not the name.
Alrighty. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Mary Lyon, she never went here. Tunnel never collapsed. People never died in the tunnel. So it's just, it's an interesting folklore. That's half of investigating and researching this is what am I hearing and what is factually accurate and what can I investigate. So that's one of those fun stories. Fun. It's a story. It's not fun, but it's a story. And so while we're here, I guess we'll also talk about Mary Lyon, which I have done some investigation. I live there, which is an investigation in its own. And it's kind of how I got into investigating on campus. Is my first weekend here, maybe even my first week, my roommate and I were at my desk looking at something on my computer, and under my bed my guitar was sitting and it made one full strum. And so we thought that was kind of crazy. I took out my EMF detector. I had a friend back at home saying, bring your ghost stuff, you're gonna like it at Plymouth. So I brought some of my ghost stuff, and that was one of them. EMF detector, asked, is there anybody here? Yes. Are you a female? Yes. And that was it. That's all we asked. That was my investigation, I guess. So I kept continuing to do researching. I did a lot of researching with Mary Lyon. It's how I met Louise McCormick. I went into her office one day and I heard, I said, I hear you are the history lady on campus. I want to know everything about Plymouth. And so luckily she had a PowerPoint from an old class that used to be taught here or something like that. So we went through everything. Some stuff had already matched up with the stories I heard and some of the evidence I captured. Of course, I would be getting a female in Mary Lyon because thanks to Louise's PowerPoint, I learned that this was originally a female school. This was a female dorm for years and years, from 1916 to maybe the 1940s or 50s, I believe it was, maybe even into the 60s. 73 was it? Yeah. So, in fact, yeah, and I'll tell you about another story. Yeah, from a former president here who he went to the attic for something, and this is when it was a female dorm. And when he went to the attic, he found a bunch of girls playing with the Ouija board and having a seance in the attic. And so some of the stories I hear from alumni and current students is that they hear walking around and they hear a rusty wheelchair kind of wheeling around up there as well. And so that was from a former president. Can you imagine walking in on that with candles and a circle? It was Dick Hage, and I believe he was either the president at the time or VP. What was he then? Just a dean at the time? He might have been the dean of students at the time then, yeah. But it was an interesting story from him. So I decided I wanted to check out the basement because basements are creepy, and Mary Lyon had a basement that we could actually get into because it's a garden level. It's where there was a couple dean offices down there, residential life is down there, and so we were using the EMF detector again, and I was with three girls and two other guys, and we were just down there sitting using this thing, and we were talking to a female at the time, and like 10 minutes into it, we all kind of felt the energy change. The air got denser, our hair started to stand up a little bit, and we were all like, I think we feel everyone, was in agreement that the energy had changed. So I asked, is this a male spirit? Is this a demonic spirit? And it said yes. And I said, do you want us here? And it said no. And I said again, are you demonic? And it said yes. And right when it did that, it made this high-pitched noise that I had never heard from the EMF detector before. And at the same time, the three girls were actually getting visibly choked. Their faces were turning blue. You could see their necks depressing. They couldn't talk. They couldn't even cough or anything. And the other two male investigators and I were getting really bad throbbing headaches. So I asked, are you trying to hurt us right now? It said yes. Grab the EMF detector. We run upstairs, and sure enough, right when we got back to the ground level, the girls could breathe again. Color was returning to their faces. And all of our headaches went away. And I think I've only done one other investigation down there since. That was the tour 2 weeks ago. And I had to do a disclaimer with all these first years. I said, does anyone not want to get choked? Okay, then we're all going to go down there. you know, I would probably raise my hand and say, no, I don't want to get choked. But everyone was like, yeah, I hope I get choked. I hope yeah. So it was still kind of sketchy down there. We were using the EMF detector. Once again, the loud ringing came back up as if there was something with negative energy that didn't want us there. So we, you know, pretty much went back upstairs, and that was that. But luckily no one got choked.